You can't, on the one hand, say that you're subject to the discipline of a particular organization and then say, but the structures that constitute the disciplining institutions of that organization are in fact illegitimate. So, of course, there's a massive contradiction, and therein lies the other hole in the whole argument. You know, the interesting thing is that they sat there saying, look, we can't be disciplined by the ANC firstly because, you know, we're an autonomous organization. We're independent of the ANC. Factually, that's just simply incorrect, because the constitution of the ANC Youth League, Article A, is quite explicit, simply saying that the ANC Youth League is governed by and it adheres to the policies and the programs of the ANC, and very importantly, Kolani, its existence derives from the constitution of the African National Congress. So it doesn't create a different structure. It doesn't say we are created separately outside the ANC. It says the existence is derived from the constitution of the ANC. So just purely on the basis of fact, on the basis of organizational legitimacy and origination, they appear to spring from outside the ANC. So they unfortunately subject to the discipline of the mother body.
Let me bring in Professor Tifo then. Let me get your sense on the arguments that were put forward by the ANC Youth League. Are they compelling to you? Do you think that they have a point?
You may say yes, they have a point. But I think you are going to split a lot of hairs if you don't really look at the thrust of the ructions within the ruling party. I think they are raising a political question here, and they want the political route to be the one that is taken, because a quasi-legal process, indeed for me, doesn't address the real issues that ought to have been addressed at the time when they began to manifest themselves, and that is 3 years ago. At that time, young men and boys were encouraged as lions that were roaring en route to Polokwane. Now, for me, the question is there anything wrong that they have done that is different from what they have done en route to Polokwane, and even in Polokwane itself?
Okay.
Now, then the question of contradictions and hypocrisy gets into the picture.
But wait a minute, Professor Tifo, let's raise the argument then that Derek Ganekom raised when he was delivering the verdict, if you will, and also the argument of the ANC at this time. They are saying, look, it happened, right? We had Polokwane, we had disorganization, and we accept that. But what happened is, in September last year, we had a National General Council that took into account everything that has happened so far, and it accepted that there is a serious problem of ill discipline. It therefore then instructed the National Executive Committee to go out there and ensure that the issues of ill discipline are dealt with. This is the first case.
Yeah, that's right. Live according to the maxim that you can will it to become a universal law. That is the fundamental tenet of justice, natural justice, right? Live according to the maxim that it to become a universal law. At the time when these things were done, they were wrong. There was ill discipline. Young men and women were disrespectful to the head of state and even to the elders, even to the rank and file of the ruling party. And the very people who today who find fault with them were there. And I dare say they were even blowing the vuvuzelas because it was in their interest. Now I repeat, live according to the maxim that you can make it a universal principle. Opportunism will come back to haunt you. And I think that's where we have arrived.
All right.
One fellow made mistakes. We ought to have reprimanded them, and we should have guided them there.
All right. So, let me welcome also my other analyst, Jabulani Sithole, Director of Historical Studies at the University of KZN. Babu Sithole, good morning.
Good morning, Pepe, and good morning to your guests and listeners.
Thank you very much. Let me get your view then on what has transpired. I'm not sure if you want to start yesterday or you want to start with the response that Mr. Julius Malema gave outside the UNISA campus in Polokwane immediately after Derek Ganekom had delivered the verdict, where he said the gloves are off. And clearly, perhaps yesterday was an extension of that comment that he made.
Surely, I mean, if you look at it, I think up until yesterday, there was a degree of ambiguity on the contestation about next year, because it's very difficult to actually look at the matter of the discipline of Julius Malema in separation, say, from the contestation of what's going to happen in Mangaung next year. Because clearly, Julius Malema has actually been involved, as the previous speaker was saying, has been involved in elements of populism, very strange behavior for those people who have been in the ANC for quite a long time. I think I'm actually interviewing a lot of the veterans. They say this. And now that there is this sort of intervention by the National Disciplinary Committee at this point, suggests that, in fact, the timing cannot be divorced from what's going to be happening next year. And clearly, from what they are saying, it's very clear now that there will be a very open contestation, which will be very interesting to watch because we don't know which direction it's going to take. But clearly, the one point that one can make is that the ANC Youth League leadership is fighting from a back foot because if you were to actually put a score and imagine soccer here, it's 1-0 to the current leadership of the ANC vis-a-vis the Youth League. And they are trying to fight back to get to a position where they can still be a factor when it comes to the leadership that will really emerge at Polokwane next year, but from a very, very serious back foot. And there is no question that, in fact, the decision itself seems to be quite expedient given the timing, because this kind of behavior should have been nipped in the bud, say, in 2007 or in 2008 if the ANC was serious about it. Okay. Now that it's actually being done now, one can actually say there is a separation from the preparations for the national conference next year and what is happening in terms of silencing people who can be seen as adversaries at this point.
Just to follow on the football analogy, in order for them to score, they'd have to have football possession. They'd have to have quite a lot of ball possession. I'm just wondering if they have any facts. Do they have any political capital ground at the moment that may assist them then in order to deal with the deficit in as far as the score is concerned?
Yeah, I think perhaps I need to even take it a bit further. They don't, because they seem to have been red-carded. Because surely if you are red-carded, you are told you need to be on the outside and you need to make noise to come on into the inside. Surely it's going to take a while for them to, if at all they're going to be successful, for them to actually lobby those that still remain within the ranks of the organization without any suspensions above their heads, hanging over their heads, to say it was unfair. And it might, I think, be so late that it really won't make a difference, because they may have to actually take this thing to a policy conference, which may be dismissed next year because the policy conference is not supposed to be attending to these issues. And they may only be in a position to come to a very favorable sort of situation by Mangaung next year, which may be too late. Clearly, they've been actually sidelined. They will make noises. It will be a talking point. But at the moment, the dominant strand within the ANC around the Secretary General seems to be in control of the matter.
Mr. Fakir, do you have any view on what may be the internal discussions about what is going on? Are there any worries about what is going on within the ANC? I presume there would be.
Of course there is. I mean, look, organizations go through attrition and renewal, and the ANC has just recently gone through serious and deep, and I think quite sort of debilitating attrition. I think this is the beginning of a process of renewal. However, I think the approach may be slightly wrong. And it's slightly wrong because I think they are dealing with what is essentially a political issue through procedural means. Now, at least this is distinct and different from a trend in which we had with our political parties not so long ago, where parties were trying to deal with political issues through the courts, through the legal process. At least they've now taken political issues back into the party, but are still using, procedural or regulatory ways of dealing with kind of errant behavior. And hopefully we'll move to a stage where political battles and ideological battles will, in fact, be ideologically and politically contested.
I'm going to take one or two SMSs, go to the lines. There is Eddie Twabala in Odendalsras who says, this development reflects time to say to Mbeki sorry. Another one from Sbusiso in Midrand says, when you mitigate a sentence, the other side must aggravate a sentence. Mitigation goes hand in hand with aggravation. M and PE says, it is not a culture or a practice in our ANC for what is known as either the top 6 or the top 5 to take fundamental or radical political decisions. Sipo in the Free State says, politics is really a dirty game. How on earth can a guy who wanted to die for an individual can within a few months hate the same person so much? Mbuisa in KZN says, we need, in fact, says Professor Tifo, please read the NGC resolutions on discipline. There is another one from Tami that says Zuma is defending the second term at all costs next year. There is an SMS as well from Abjina who says the ANC Youth League is going overboard by using the media to appeal on the decision to suspend officials. Lots of your SMSs, I'm going to be looking at them in a minute at 34701, but let me take some calls. Professor Turok has called from Cape Town, a veteran of the ANC if there ever was one. Professor Turok, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for your call.
Thank you. I am a veteran.
Yes.
I would say that the ANC does have room for many differences, and there are divergencies of opinion. But what I don't like is that Malema now talks about the leadership as the enemy. We cannot have this kind of talk within the ANC. We are not enemies, and if there are differences, they must be settled. The second point I want to make is this, that the media, and particularly the press, must be very careful in the way they handle these matters. Today's Business Day has a headline on the front page that an MP has been let off the hook. This is an absolute lie. The fact of the matter is that the Ethics Committee in Parliament has found a Member of Parliament of the ANC guilty of misdemeanor, and that person is going to be disciplined in Parliament. There's no letting off the hook. And this headline in Business Day is a violation of the press code and the way the media report things. And so I would say that on the Malema issue and all the other political issues that are now confronting us, we call upon the press not to headline adversely, not to sensationalize these matters. There are differences, they're quite big differences. Allow us to handle these in a proper manner.
Just before I let you go, of course, I would like to talk a little bit about how the veterans are viewing the ongoing then saga, including the ANCYL. Do you think that this is the hardest time for the organization?
It is, and we are deeply disturbed that the differences within the ANC, many of which are legitimate, some of the economic differences are quite important, and perhaps the government has become a little bit too cautious on economic matters. And I'm not talking about nationalization. I'm talking about economic policy in general. You know, we've been in power 17 years, and that's a long time. And there is ample room for people to disagree and for people to promote more aggressive, militant policies, radical policies. That's fine. The ANC allows that and must allow it. But this should be done in a proper manner, without insults, without this kind of enemy talk. And so, yes, the veterans are disturbed because the traditions of the ANC are not being observed and not being respected.